Today, class, I've again have with me Anthony Capps, a former student in EDM 310, a former lab professional in EDM 310, now a third grade teacher at Baldwin County Elementary School in Gulf Shores, and also a really good friend of mine and of EDM 310. He is a true practitioner of project based learning, as I try to be, and I want him to share with you his experiences in the classroom as he carries out this project based learning activities. So, Anthony, let me ask you a couple of questions here. Um, how do you approach being a project based learning teacher, and what does it involve, and how do you get ready for it, and what happens in your classes as a result?
Okay, well, my ideas about project-based learning are constantly evolving. Um,
Or mine.
and a lot of people, when we think about project-based learning, we think projects are what you do at the end of a lesson to show that you've learned what you were supposed to learn. But
Rather than a
um,
method by which you learn. Is that the contrast you're trying to make there?
exactly.
Yeah.
So the goal now of project-based learning and the shift that educators have to take with the way they think about project-based learning is that it's not only a means to show that the student has achieved something that you need them to achieve, but it's a means to get them to learn something. So
Right.
you're allowing them to be excited about and own their own learning because they're creating something as they discover the knowledge. And a lot of times, the goal of the project, you have to create a project that they will need all of the content you need them to know in order to complete that project. So the goal of a good project is one that has an authentic audience so that the kids are rewarded for the work that they do and they're motivated to do good work. One that is has student interest, so you can do something that's relevant to the kids' lives. One that the best, I think, involves the community somehow, because then you have them see that it really is related to the real world experience. But most importantly, they are driven by content. So what that means is we are given content standards by the state and by the federal government now too that drive what a third grader is supposed to learn. So whenever I create a project, I try to think, what kind of project can I create that will give my student an opportunity to need to know the content that I need them to know. So in order for them to complete the project that I want them to complete, they have to know the the content that the state requires them to know. So
Okay.
they're motivated to get those lessons.
Right. Let me. I know a couple that you did because you and I have talked about that in a previous class. Helped you, as a matter of fact, with some ideas about projects. But uh, give us a couple examples. One of the ones that I first remember you doing was having the students write letters to their congressman, Joe Bonner.
Oh, right. So one of the letters this year, recently this year in 2012 or 2013, women have become allowed to serve in open combat, and that was hitting the headlines. So it was timely, and I brought that information to my students to find out what they thought about it, and it allowed me to hit a lot of my writing standards, reading standards, and social studies standards that the state needs me to cover with my kids.
That's
Because
the
what I did is
ACCRS, the Alabama Career and College Ready Standards, College and Career Ready Standards.
that's
Okay.
absolutely right.
Yep.
Um, what we did is we tied that in with our basal text, which is the Reading Street series that we use Reading Street as our basal text, and we were talking about equality and cultures. So with our talk about equality, we I had them use a tool called iCurio, and they had to find female or minority historic figures that demonstrated um, success to show that like whenever it was uncommon. So like the first female astronauts or the first female scientists or the first African American pilots, that kind of thing. So they were finding someone in history that served a military capacity that would they could use that information to write to Congressman Bonner whether they thought that it was appropriate for women to fight in open combat or not. And so they had their opinion. Then they supported their opinion about whether it was or was not appropriate by giving Congressman Bonner an example of a historic figure who rose above the challenges of being a minority and still serving in the military in a great capacity or whatever else they chose to do with that.
So
And then
this,
they,
so this, did it interest them? That was number one point that you made, to devise
oh,
a pro,
absolutely.
and
Yes.
so they got excited about that particular project. The second was,
Well, right, because they have parents who serve in the military and they have family friends who serve in the military, so they can interview informally their family and family friends. And it was amazing how much information they came back to school with just because they were having that conversation at home.
right, it was content driven in that it met reading and social studies and of your writing standards, and it was directed toward the community in that it addressed an issue in a public forum to a public official. And I imagine you got some responses from the congressman's office, didn't you, or not?
Yes, and we actually only chose 8 of the letters, so they critique each other's letters, and I had 28 kids, and it wasn't 100% completion. There were several that didn't get through, like they finished their rough drafts, but they never completed their final draft. So we sent, after reviewing everybody's, we sent 8 of them off, and those were the 8 that the students felt most proud of in terms
So
of
the
because they
students
had
actually made that selection, is that right?
right. It
So
became
they were
clear.
able to they were able to critique each other and to reflect on which ones should be sent, and made that choice.
Exactly. Exactly.
And they're in the third
So
grade, is that correct?
in third grade, so
Third
that's like
grade.
8 and 9 years old. Yeah. But it doesn't become a personal thing because then they're all invested and they all feel like they're represented by those letters whenever you have them peer edited and
Right.
peer revise and peer select. So it
Another,
helps the grading process.
and what?
And it makes the grading process easier because you
Oh,
can
right.
do it while they're revising and use their points to, I mean, they're making valid points for why it's a quality letter or not.
So what did the congressman say? Did you get just stock replies, or did you?
We got pretty stock replies,
Yeah,
but just because it was had the stamp from the state office,
they were
the kids
excited
were
about it.
excited.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Let me ask you. There was another one, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a student who was not one had I think was taking the third grade for a second time, and there was an interpretation which people did, and then you gave one, and she told you why you were wrong and made an excellent argument about that. I don't remember the whole story. Do you
I
remember it?
forgot. Raised her hand and she said, "Mr. Caps, I know why that's the correct answer." And we do it on a T chart. So on one side of the chart, we give all the given reasons we think it's this answer, and on the other side of the chart, we give all the reasons it's this answer. And we had like 2 or 3 reasons why we thought that it was the answer choice I had chosen. Well, Gabrielle came and pointed in the text. She pointed to a paragraph where it described the golden grasses and the pink skies and the brown rigid mountains. You know, like it had a lot of really great description, and it was very clear what the answer was after she pointed that out because she knew to go straight to the text. But that democracy in the grading process and that reflection opportunity is so key to project-based learning. I mean, that was not necessarily a project that we were doing that week, but in project-based learning, the most crucial part is their opportunity to revise and reflect on their work. And we do that in everything. So even when they take a standard test that comes with the Maisel series, we revise or we review the test answers, and it gives them it's a democracy is what it is. So
Uh,
it's great.
I just love that story. I mean, it's so fantastic because it shows learning happening, and that teachers are learners as well. And I think that's one of the things that is really important for us to remember. Okay, I've brought up 2. Have you got another project that you want to tell about?